And we live. What's good? What's good? What's good with y'all? Chat, man. It's your boy Katumwa. We back with another Mother FN review. Let's get it, man. Let's not review, but y'all know what the fuck I mean. Let's get right into this video, man. As y'all see the title, you know what I'm saying? It is what it is. We're gonna hop right into it, and I want y'all to understand that I'm genuinely watching these videos to learn. I genuinely want to understand these people. I want to. These conversations need to be had. You know, in society, we can't keep blackballing these conversations. You know what I'm saying? We can't keep censoring these conversations. They should be had so everybody could feel heard. So I'm genuinely listening to understand, even though obviously I have my own biases when it comes to the subject. You know what I mean? But my biases are often rooted in truth and reality. So who wouldn't have them? But let us carry on. Let's get right into the video, man. And shout out to Jubilee. I hope I'm saying that right for having these conversations because Lord knows somebody got to. Let's get it.
Okay, so if I were a white person and I said I want to transition into a black person, and I'm redefining what blackness is to fit what I view it as, right? Would you consider that appropriation?
I consider that dodging, and I consider that comparing apples to oranges because race and gender identity are two separate different things.
Why is not positive? Off the rip, it's just like off the rip. There's a lot of delusion. Like there has to be some level of base of reality that we can all agree upon to be able to have these conversations. And he didn't even respond to the hypothetical that she was giving. He just went on to say that she was dodging, even though obviously the analogy correlated directly to the topic at point. Like, come on now, man. Let us carry on though. Let's see where this goes.
Step forward if you agree. The transgender movement is indoctrinating our youth.
We are seeing, especially on social media, on TikTok, you're seeing a lot of people in this community really just targeting children. And you're seeing drag shows, even in conservative states like Texas, and even just media, movies. Like, it seems like everything seems to be targeted at these kids. You have drag story hour for kids, and it's just really, I think, predatory in a way. And I'm not saying every trans person is doing this, but as a whole, there does seem to be a route that they're taking to get to the kids.
When you hear Blue's Clues playing in the next room, and then you hear the gay parade song, it's Blue's Clues, you're not expecting to be talking to the children about that. It really makes you wonder, are they really coming for the children?
And I think we see in our population now, the rate of young children who are identifying as transgender, non-binary is skyrocketing. And I think there's something to be said for people who are truly experiencing gender dysphoria, which we recognize exists, and those who are experiencing what is now going to be called, or in the future going to be called, this social contagion gender dysphoria, where they're being exposed to it on social media or in school, or mom and dad are having a conversation about it with children, and children are now starting to develop gender confusion.
Or even babies, right? People who are being born, they don't have to put the gender on the birth certificate, and they're saying you can choose whatever you want to be. Like, that's so dangerous. Even lying to them, saying like, oh, if we put you on hormone blockers at this age, it won't do anything to your puberty. It won't affect you long term. And it's just a straight up lie.
See, and that's another thing I have a problem with because there's no transparency when it comes to this conversation, because obviously puberty blockers would have a dramatic effect on a child's development. Come on now, that's obvious. Like, there is absolutely no reason why children should be on hormone therapy or anything of the sort. And when it comes to gender ideology at birth, a child cannot identify as anything. A child can't even identify anything within the outside world. How are they supposed to internalize that? How are they supposed to, it doesn't make sense to me. It feels like a lot of parents are using this as, I don't want to say indoctrination, but it's not informing the child. These children are, subjected to whatever the parents want to subject them to. So I don't know where this leaves us in society, but it's delusional to think that parents shouldn't parent and children should just be able to do whatever the fuck that they please. That's not what parenting is.
And there's like an entire Reddit thread dedicated to people who transitioned, talking about how much they hate their life now because they transitioned as a child and now they amputated off healthy body parts and are miserable.
All right. Can the disagreeer step forward?
The fact that the trans movement has got people shook has me so excited. The trans movement is not indoctrinating our youth. Our youth are understanding who they are at a younger age. And from what I was hearing over here is
and already
a lot of what y'all
already you can tell with this person that they don't actually understand that there are different phases of adolescent development that a child's psyche goes through. You can't even conceptualize certain things at the age of 5 and 10 and 11 that you can conceptualize after you're 18. This is why children are not allowed to get tattoos. They're not allowed to drive cars. They're not allowed to do an extended amount of things because their brain just cannot conceptualize the consequences or foresee what can come from as a result of the decisions that they would be making at that very adolescent age. Imagine if you as a child were to do something this dramatic. Would you then not look back at your past? Like, why did my parents allow me to do such a thing? Would you not resent your parents for allowing you to have such freedom when their job was to parent and keep you essentially from having too much freedom until you're ready for it? This doesn't make sense to me. But this person obviously doesn't understand the concept of adolescent development.
y'all were saying, I wonder would you say it to the parents? Because we need to really look at what the parents of trans youth really go through. Trans youth, instead of them enjoying their life, playing with their friends, they're up in legislation trying to fight for basic rights here. 1 in 5 transgender youth have tried to commit suicide. Why are we trying to police them?
But you're bringing it only to the parents. Being the
This is
question was,
another thing. When it comes to like the skyrocketing number of of transgender children or just transgender people alone committing high rates of suicide, it shows that there's, self-deletion. It shows that there's other mental stigmas, other mental dysphorias, other mental issues that are going on here, other outside of just gender ideology, because we're essentially teaching the child to, in a way, hate themselves because, okay, they're obviously a boy, and you tell them, you know what, you're supposed to be a girl. Of course, it's going to cause some type of resentment in the child's mindset. Think, God, why would you put me in the wrong body? God, why would you do this to me? And it create an environment where a child can grow up to hate themselves. This is why I don't agree with this kind of rhetoric, essentially, because children are supposed to be taught to love themselves, not to resent who they came into this world as and resent who they actually are, because there's no changing who you actually are. But let us carry on.
indoctrination in general, am I correct? And then,
But they are part of that conversation. Someone said something about drag shows coming to schools or whatnot. The kids enjoyed it. The parents just had a problem with it. But that's their issue. It's only someone dressed in drag reading a story.
And this is where we go again with the delusion. Like the kids, he said the kids enjoyed it, but the parents had a problem with it. Obviously, the parents are there to curate what their children cannot be exposed to. Of course, the parents are going to have a problem with it because the parents can actually have a developed brain to where they can conceptualize and understand how this could affect their children in the near future or the later future, obviously. So if the parents are having a problem with it, children don't know right from wrong, don't know left from right. So of course, children are not going to have a problem with anything that they're being subjected to. Of course, like they're children, they're not going to really have an opinion. They're just laughs and giggles. Children can't even decipher the difference between reality and fantasy. This is why children want to be fucking superheroes when they grow up and whatnot as children. We've all been through these phases. If you can't even decipher that men can't fly, then how can you decipher that whether or not men can be women or not? This isn't something that children should be discussing in the first place.
Is
That could have
drag
been
not
anybody.
blackface for women? I see it as a caricature of womanhood.
But
Inherently
It's
sexual as
insulting.
well.
I have to agree with you guys. I do not like the drag queen social hours. I personally, as a trans person, didn't ever go to a drag show until I was about 40. I'm not for the sexualization of kids. Why are we not letting kids be kids and bringing sex into their life so early?
I think it's predatory in general to talk about sex with children.
Yeah.
Straight sex.
Right, and see, they think it's all about, we're trying to keep them away from homosexuality, which we are, of course, because it's not the way that God intended this world to be, but we're also keeping them away from heterosexual sex. Children shouldn't be indulging in these thoughts of okay, let me not say these thoughts because kids gonna be kids and mind gonna be curious, but they shouldn't be indulging in these acts or of any sort. They're listening to any type of information surrounding these subjects in their young age, before their teens. Essentially, there's no reason to have a 7-year-old having a conversation about their sexual ideology or who they're interested in as a sexual partner. You're not even old enough to procreate from as you're not even old enough to procreate as a result from sexual intercourse. So why are we even discussing this? Why is this even a topic that matters? Let's let kids be kids and let us carry on.
Any kind of sex.
Who's teaching sex to third grade children? I really want to know.
Have you looked at
There's
the California curriculum for sex education?
Everywhere.
You need to.
I know that when I was in preschool, I got my first crush on a boy because to me at the time, he was in kindergarten, he looked like Prince Eric from
Little Mermaid.
Yeah, Little Mermaid. I don't think like fucking him ever crossed my mind when I was 4, but obviously like it would have been good to know that like it's okay, like if you have these feelings for someone of the same sex.
When we think of youth in general, they're having sex at a lot younger age, whether we like it or not. Let's just keep it 100%
You don't think it's
real.
because of that?
But children are not having sex at the age that they're being exposed to transgender ideologies and LGBTQ rhetoric. Like these are children that are 5, 6, 7 years old. Nobody's having sex at that age. You know, kids might be doing that type of stuff at 14, 15, later in their teen years, which is still haram, but you know, kids gonna be kids, of course, especially new generation that we're living in that's, you know, over sexualized children. But they're not doing it at the ages that they're being exposed to this transgender ideology and all these other rhetorics. There's children that are 4, 5, 6, 7. We're saying that children at birth can identify as whatever they want. And these children, toddlers, like, come on, this is ridiculous. So he's trying to brush off to the fact that it is children that young. Like, it's not just happening to children that are of age of sexual intercourse, even though that's not really necessarily of age, but you gotta understand what I'm saying.
I do not think it's because of that. It starts at home with parents teaching their children, because one or two things are gonna happen. Either you teach your children or the world is gonna teach your kids. That's the reality of it.
They are learning about it at younger ages from some adult or even their peers who learned about it from adults. That is in definition indoctrination. As a mother and seeing what my children are going to have to be introduced to at such a young age, like I didn't even know what a gay person was till I was like 12. And so they're going to be having these really heavy adult conversations at a really young age just because of their exposure. And that is honestly just scary because I don't want to have those conversations. That's why I will be homeschooling my kids because I do believe it is my responsibility to protect them and shield them from the outside world.
My connection messing up, man. All right, I think we're back. We back? All right, yeah, we're back.
Which is targeting children.
The trans community and the trans movement is really shaking the course of what people think gender identity is supposed to be.
So in one sentence, you're saying that you guys are not responsible for the indoctrination that's currently happening with
Absolutely
children.
not.
And in the second sentence, you are saying we are shook by the fact that you are responsible for it.
No, you are shook at the fact that the trans movement has become what it is.
And a movement that influences people
Powerful.
all over the world, and particularly children. And we see it in the fact that the number of young people identifying as transgender, non-binary, gender fluid, genderqueer is skyrocketing, which means that children are being exposed to these ideas. And it's certainly coming from institutions like the media, like Hollywood, like our...
I don't think homie is gonna agree with anything these women have to say. The biological women, of course. The other one, him right here, he seems to be somewhat based in, sensical reality. Nobody has a problem with what you do as an adult. That's your own life. Do what you want to do. But it's the children that we need to protect, and it's the children that can't be exposed to these types of environments, this type of rhetoric, this type of indoctrination, essentially, because it's not coming from anywhere else but there. So at least some of these people do understand that this isn't the topic of conversation that children should be having. So shout out to those people in the LGBT and trans community that understand that. Let children be children, and then whatever you do with your life after you're an adult, that's what you do with your life. Nobody cares. Nobody, you know what I'm saying? Nobody's going to control your life. That's all up to you. But let's at least allow children to get to a state of mind in which they can conceptualize the consequences that come with their actions. Let us carry on.
Public institutions and schools. So to say that that is not happening or to deny that that is the reality negates the numbers that we're seeing.
What I would say is that the idea that there is a single transgender movement and ideology is disingenuous, and that at its core, being transgender is about separating sex from sex roles and gender roles that are compulsory.
Do you think that children should be able to transition medically?
No,
I think
no.
it just really depends on each individual situation. They should be able to make the best medical decision for.
See, here we go again. This brother does not understand that children cannot make the best decision possible for themselves. They haven't lived enough life, and their brain hasn't developed to the point where they can, once again, conceptualize the consequences of their actions. What is he talking about? Like, this is almost blasphemous. At least the other transgender brother, sister, whatever, he understands that children are not in a place to be making these decisions. So I can at least appreciate that from him. But this brother right here seems to believe that children are just born with the innate ability to conceptualize all the consequences of the world and should be able to make their own decisions. What would be the point of parenting? Why are the children not just born and thrown into the world? Why do they have to be nurtured to until they're essentially 18 years old before they can start making their own decisions? Were these rules implemented and put in place for absolutely no reason, just because? Like, come on now. These are obviously measures that were taken to make sure that children didn't make idiotic decisions that could affect their lives dramatically. But this brother does not seem to actually even conceptualize that himself. So maybe it's not just an age thing. Maybe it's just the development in the brain. I don't know. But he seems to believe that children can just create their own situations and deal with their own consequences without the help or directing of a parent, which is absolutely blasphemous. Let us carry on.
Them.
I am comfortable sharing bathrooms with the other side.
I don't want to hear this. Boy, I want to hear this.
Yes, I feel comfortable. Safe, that might be a different question, but comfortable, yes, I feel comfortable.
What I think the bathroom issue.
She's coping. I gotta stop that right there. She said, "Yes, I might feel comfortable." See, this is what's wrong too with these conversations that are being had. Some women are scared to hurt feelings, or scared to ruffle some feathers. How do you feel comfortable but not safe? I have never been in an unsafe situation in which I felt comfortable. That literally doesn't make sense. That literally contradicts the meaning of both words because they almost coincide with one another. How do you feel unsafe but comfortable? Have you ever been hanging out of a car going 200 miles per hour but felt safe? But felt comfortable even though you were unsafe, hanging out the window? Like that's not what? What does that even mean? Like, come on now, man. Just if you're gonna be for real, be for real. You don't feel safe, you don't feel comfortable. Those are almost one and the same when it comes to the context of the conversation. Let us carry on.
Opens up is an issue of predatory men taking advantage of the opening. That now they could walk into a women's bathroom or a women's locker room, as we've seen happen in instances like here in Los Angeles at We Spa. And they go into a women's space, they expose themselves to the women, and then they say, well, I'm a trans woman and you've opened up this space for me.
Well, we cannot blame trans people for that. And
Nobody's blaming you.
That's the problem right here. Because again, when you walk into the bathroom, I'm not interested in knowing what you are, what you identify as.
Yes, we cannot blame trans people for their own actions. Like, what?
Trying to use the bathroom and leave out of there. What people have tried to say is that when trans women go in the bathrooms, they're being predatory, and that is not the case. That is something we do not blame on trans women. Although you were not saying that, when we talk about predatory behavior and when we talk about...
Okay, this brother is also missing the point because regardless of whether or not it is trans people that are doing it, which oftentimes I guess it was, I don't actually have a statistic on that, but it's the fact that trans people are the ones that are allowing this to be even a thing in which men can go into female bathrooms if in the situation in which they do have a predatory mindset or predatory what's the word I'm looking for? Predatory. What's the word I'm looking for? That's aspirations, for lack of a better word. But it's the fact that you are creating an environment in which that these people can slip through the cracks and enact on these thoughts and do the things that they do. It's not the fact. This is like she's missing the complete whole point. Nobody's blaming trans people. It's just not creating a good environment for regular people, regular women. It's creating something that's never been done before.
Like the predatory cases, none of them have been trans women. So I just want to make sure. I know she's not strictly doing that, but
that's cap. And I honestly 1000% believe that he didn't look at any statistics behind this or any of that. He's just speaking from own personal knowledge, personal biases, his feelings. He feels like none of them are ever trans, but that doesn't absolutely make zero sense. It absolutely makes zero sense. Like, these aren't 300-pound, bald-headed, shredded men walking into these bathrooms committing these acts. These are men that are trying to appear like women. I'm not saying that it's all trans people that are doing these, but to say that it's none is absolutely blasphemous.
because she said that, I think it's very important that I bring that out on the table and discuss that.
We have to have the conversation. Now, I'll open up the question. We know that if this legislation happens, if we move forward with this move, there are going to be men who take advantage of it.
Right.
Now, I want to ask you, is your comfort as far as going to the bathroom more important than the female women that will be victimized by this?
Who said female women will be victimized by this?
They will, and they have.
No, you're only assuming, but
What? See, this brother has no actual sense in base. Oh my gosh, this is actually frustrating to watch. To assume, like, we just went over the fact that there are certain people, certain men, trans or not, that are taking advantage of these certain situations, going into these female bathrooms with, you know, the wrong motives, essentially, to have these, the wrong motives, essentially. So we already agreed upon that fact, and she's saying that, oh, you can't blame trans women for that. Within saying that, you already acknowledge that there's a possibility of things that has happened and can happen. And then he carries on to go ahead and say that women aren't going to be victimized because of this change, and that's just an assumption. Like, if you honestly believe that, then you don't understand that the terror and the aggression that exists within the male community. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that we all know that there's a whole bunch of crazy motherfuckers out there that are willing to do anything to get their way. We all understand this. We all know this. This is the way that the world has always been since the beginning of time. So to say that there will be no victims from this, how can you promise that? She's just basically I'm tripping. He is basically just playing verbal gymnastics to dance around answering the actual question at hand. She asked a very specific question in a very specific way. But to block and dance around that question, he's going to assume that there will be no victims that come out of this. Come on now, let's be serious. Answer the question. Do you think that your comfortability is more important than biological women's safety? That's the question at hand. That's the question that he does not want to answer for obvious reasons. Let us continue.
the reality of it is, again, when people are going into the restroom, when people are only going into the restroom, they're only focused on doing one or two things, and that's using the restroom.
Yeah.
But you didn't answer the question. Is your comfort more important than the female people who could be victims?
And let's be 100. If people were only focused on doing one thing when they went to the bathroom, then there wouldn't be two separate bathrooms for males and females. Obviously, there are some wicked people in this world that would be slightly inclined to focus on other things if they were in the same bathroom as the opposite gender. We can all completely, especially knowing that there's no cameras within the bathroom because of obvious privacy reasons, we can all sit here and agree that that would probably be a recipe for disaster. Well, all of us except him, of course. Let us carry on.
Victimized by this.
Okay, so let me help her answer the question. Which one do you think I'm going to get the shit kicked out of me in? It wasn't the women's restroom. The issue that you're bringing up, first of all, is already violating a whole bunch of laws. Okay, if somebody's exposing themselves in a bathroom, that's a whole different environment rather than just letting trans people in. In California, it's right now 100% legal for trans people to go use the bathroom of their choice. So I don't know what law you're talking about.
You're asking this question as if I would not stand up for cis women that were in the restroom, and that's not the case. Nice dodge there. But
dodging.
the reality of it is, one thing I'm noticing is we're reducing a lot of these particular conversations to genitalia. And it's not about genitalia, it's about safety.
Yeah, her concern is the possibility of predation. And
so neither one of them actually answered the question. Obviously, he didn't pick that part up. He was a master manipulator in playing verbal gymnastics to dance around the question. And his counterpart also helped him avoid the question because his little intel, his 2 cents, whatever that was, had absolutely no information. It didn't inform anybody on anything, and it didn't answer the question. It didn't help to answer the question. He opened his mouth as if he was going to steer it in that direction, but obviously did not for obvious reasons, which is kind of interesting.
And that's still a probability. It doesn't matter if trans people are using the restroom or not. Sure. But what you're concerned about is that you're maybe possibly that people feel more emboldened to put on women's clothes and go in the bathroom, but they're still violating the law all over the place if that's the purpose that they're going in for.
See, by the time
so I didn't step forward.
Is by the time that you realize that, by the time that these laws are violated, is it not too late? If a biological male that does not identify as a female, which is absurd to me because you can't identify as something that you're not, but for the sake of the conversation, biological male that does not identify as a female decides to put on a wig and a dress and go into the bathroom and female bathroom in a public setting or private setting and commit some horrific acts. By the time we figure this out, is it not too late? It's not like somebody's gonna stop, especially in 2023. Nobody's gonna stop a man walking into a female bathroom with a dress in fear of being cancel culture, in fear of having charges pressed against them, in fear of seeming, prejudice. You know what I'm saying? So by the time that all these laws that he is speaking on are broken, is it not already too late? Let us carry on.
Because, and I know in today's age, this is going to sound very radical and, but I don't agree with the whole transgender ideology. And so for me, it's encouraging something that is based in what I feel is delusion. And so I don't think that we should be encouraging that by allowing men into women's restrooms.
See, shout out to her. Shout out to this sister right here that came in with absolutely no fear of speaking her mind and said exactly what it is, no sugarcoating, because why spare men's feelings? The rest of the world doesn't spare our feelings, so why not just give it to us how it fucking is, especially when it comes to a sensitive matter like this, which has to do with the safety of our women. Come on, just give it. The rest of these women need to take some notes from her. Just give it to them straight. Give it to them flat. Give it to them how the fuck it is.
I think that if that's the case, that to some extent all gender is delusion. If we're looking at
this is
historically anywhere from...
Oh my gosh. This is why we cannot have these conversations, because you have to be somewhat planted or based in the same reality. We have to be living on the same earth. We have to understand the same logic for us to be able to even have this conversation. She makes an obvious, clear point, which is obviously backed by biology, science, and anatomy. Anything you can think of is biblically, like anything that you can think of is backed by. Anything. It's all backed. Everything that she said is backed by everything, essentially. And then she goes on to say, "Well, I guess then gender itself isn't real, and." And if that's a brother, then he. But I honestly don't know. But like, don't start spewing gibberish. Like, answer her directly. Like, what she's saying is obviously based in reality. When these people aren't in the same reality, then you can't have one of these conversations because we're essentially not living in the same world. If she says I'm not here, then I guess I'm not here, even though I'm right here. Let us carry on.
Midwives after the enclosure of the commons in the 1400s, having their whole trade affected, or Brewsters having their trade affected. And now we don't think of women as, Brewsters, or that creating beer is a womanly thing. These all came from social conditions. These all came, a lot of gender, regardless of biological sex, it didn't like naturally flow out of our genitals. And like, it was like, we're like, this is how my genitals are, so this is like how my gender is gonna be. That didn't happen. That's not life. Like, a lot of people who are either.
What's so like absolutely confusing about these people is, if that didn't happen, if our genitals and the other 2,463 whatever differences between the male and the the male and the female anatomy, biology, didn't determine what was male and what was woman, then what did? These people are so quick to say, oh, this didn't mean that. So what did? How did we get to the point where we realized the male was a male and the female was a female? How did we get to that point then? If that's not the way, if the science and the biology and the anatomy and the biblical research is not the way, then how did we get to the conclusion? These people are so quick to debunk something but not give another antidote to the situation. How did we get here then? How did we come to these conclusions? How did people from one part of the earth that have never met people on the other part of the earth come to the same exact conclusion about gender? How do two clans of people that have never even met each other from polar opposites of the earth come up with the same conclusion about gender? How? How has it been like this for eons and eons? How? Please, how? Like, I want to know how. Please inform me. Since these people seem to know everything.
They're transgender or who are LGBT in general. All my friends were girls. At first, I just remember there were a lot of things where like I would kind of like come up against people telling me that that's wrong, like that whether it's something I like, something I want to do. It wasn't until kindergarten that like someone told me that I'm a boy, and I was like, oh, I don't feel comfortable going to any bathroom in this world, like in the current society we live in. And to make trans women the whipping girls of that, I think that's disingenuous, but I do think that we need a systemic change to make ourselves safer. I don't really know anyone who doesn't feel a little bit uncomfortable going to the bathroom.
And trans people are not a delusion. Let's make it very clear. We're here. We've been here for ages. We've been here since the beginning of time. We're in your history books.
See, there's just like a cognitive dissonance within his mind, because obviously he meant when she spoke on delusion, she meant your ideology, your mindset, the way that you perceive the world is delusional, which you could argue is absolutely delusional. Not the fact that you're a living human being with a human being body. Like, she tries so hard to make the other girl sound ridiculous. He tries so hard to make the other person sound ridiculous that he's not really even saying anything. Like, what are you saying?
I think it's very disingenuous to say that a whole identity is a delusion.
I believe that you feel like women. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there is an objective truth, and I don't believe in his truth, her truth, their truth, my truth. Like, there is truth, and
Who defined that truth?
And like it's already defined. And I, as a Christian, I believe God.
Truth isn't backed by, like I said, biology, anatomy, science. You can go into biblical research if you want to. Any religion. There's no religion. I don't think there's no religion at all that says anything about transgender ideology. This is actually a new phenomenon in American. I mean, not even American, a European phenomenon that's going on here. You go to the deepest crevices of Africa or anywhere else in the world, you're not going to see men trying to be women, because it seems like the closer you get to survival, the more male and female start to tend to fall into their gender roles, which is inherently natural. This is how it's always been.
Is the one who set truth.
But who defined that?
Is the truth?
Can you tell me who defined that?
God.
Living in the Bible Belt with religion.
He is so quick to ask her for her research and statistics and, quote where she got her information from, even though it's obviously universally known. But when she speaks this blasphemous rhetoric, nobody even asks her where she got this information, because we all know the information is coming from his feelings. Sorry, talking about her, but from his feelings. This isn't his conclusions are not based on any reality. It's not based off of any research. This is just his feelings and what's been going on in his head and his other LGBTQ friends' heads that he probably conversates with. But don't ask for research and facts and statistics if you're not willing to present them yourself. That's kind of hypocritical.
Taking center stage, it's hard for a lot of trans and non-binary folks like myself to really be able to express who they are. I had to really take on my gender dysphoria in private. I couldn't talk to my mom about it. I couldn't talk to my dad, my siblings, because...
Pause. The brother just admitted that he has a gender dysphoria. This is why you cannot conversate with these people and argue or debate them about anything. The brother just admitted that he has a gender dysphoria. Does that not close the whole conversation? Does that not make it obvious that there are other mental stigmas that are going on, mental issues that are in place to make people I'm not going to say everybody, but this person specifically think or feel the way that they do? A gender dysphoria is being uncomfortable with your gender, your body, who you are, who you were born as, who the world perceives you as, because that's who you are, right? Like this is all rooted in you not being okay with who you are. So you obviously understand who you are. You just don't want to be that, and that's that. What does that mean? Like this is just so confusing. Did he not just admit to having a gender dysphoria? So how could you sit here and back and say that this is a real thing? If let us carry on, man. This is wow.
Because ultimately, I felt like it wasn't going to lead to anything because there wasn't a lot of education in the cis community like there is in the trans and non-binary community. We're talking about a book that was written by...
There's no such thing as a cis community. Like, what's this whole cis word? Like, you guys are just making words up to self-identify. I mean, to help other people identify as different things. Hey, brother. Let me see this. Hey, brother. Good to see you still on that grind. Just Pearly Things channel just dropped an interview with Nick Fuentes. Definitely worth the reaction. All right, bet. I'm about to just do that reaction after this. Yeah, my bad, man. I ain't been streaming in a little minute, so probably gotta get my views back up. But appreciate you for coming out. Appreciate you for the suggestion. I'm definitely gonna look at that. I did see a snippet of that actually prior to doing this, so I'm probably gonna go ahead and see what that interview went like, because that seems like it could be very interesting. But another thing with these people, see how they're so quick to, like, I didn't even listen to what he had to say, but see how he's about to go ahead and try to debunk all of religion. These people have no type of religious ideology. So this is another common thing amongst transgender people. Not saying all of them, of course, but they have no type of religious ideologies. Essentially, to an extent, they almost do not believe in God, or not in the way that we do, not in the way that Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and any other major religion that you could think of believes in God. So that's kind of confusing when it comes to it's not even kind of confusing. It kind of just speaks for itself when it comes to their ideologies and how they think. And they think that they're beyond everything, of course, because if you don't have to answer to a higher power, you crown yourself that higher power. This is why people think that they can manipulate reality and that that their feelings overwhelm facts. And that's just not how the world works. It's just absolutely not.
A man with his own bias.
Who created chromosomes?
Yeah, I'm personally not religious, and I believe in science.
When we talk about chromosomes, it goes back to the conversation we were talking about earlier about being intersex.
So we're not talking about intersex. We're talking about people who were born as a male and they try to transition. The whole fact that they're trying to transition into a female in the first place shows that they aren't actually that, or else there would be no need to transition, right? So you say, okay.
Some base reality fact right there. The fact that they are trying to transition into something else within itself shows that they are not that thing that they're trying to transition to, because there's no transitioning from male to male because you're already a male. There's no transitioning from female to female because you were born a female, you will always be a female. So the fact that transitioning is even a thing shows that you are not the thing that you were trying to transition to, and that just because you cosmetically change your appearance doesn't mean you're going to change the other 2,464, 63, however many biological differences that there are between male and female. You cannot change those. No matter how hard you try, you will never be able to change your DNA. It's embedded within you to the deepest extremity. Let us carry on.
I feel like a woman. What is that? What does that feel like?
Yeah, how does
And
it
how do you know?
I'm not saying I feel like a woman. I am a woman.
So then why did you transition? Why can't you just present as a
See, no base in reality. She obviously just explained that she had to transition, and she was discussing the topic of transitioning. But now she is a woman. He is a woman instead of he is trying to transition into a woman. He understood completely what she said, but something in his mind just wanted to block that truth from reaching his frontal cortex and being conceptualized. For some reason, these people are in denial. For some reason, these people do not want to come to agree onto a common floor. And I don't know, I guarantee you, this whole video, he will not agree with a single thing that these women say. The real women, he will not agree with a single thing that they say. Why? Because he's consumed in his delusion.
the man, but be a woman.
I transitioned so I could be who I was. I did not feel like I was the person that I identified with when I was
And let's
born.
stop abusing the English language. I transitioned so I could be who I was. A transition doesn't take you from what you are to what you were. Like, you don't transition. Transition is changing what you are into something else. That's not like, what? That sentence itself didn't even make sense. Like, these people are just, gosh, let me stop saying these people because it's not all of them. Obviously, the other brother seems to understand some of the concepts that are, obviously rooted in reality, but this is just pure delusion, ladies and gentlemen. Just let us carry on.
So I took the steps to align my outside body with how I feel on the inside. What makes you stand up every day and make you identify as a woman? Let me challenge you on that.
I am a woman, and I don't like being called a cis woman because I'm not a cis woman. I'm a woman. I'm not a birthing person. I'm a mother.
So get mad at the terminology, not at trans people.
It's your new terminology.
But this is what I notice a lot of cis women.
If this isn't speaking numbers, this isn't just speaking numbers about what's going on. Like, come on. Like, come on, please, come on. What are you talking about? What is he even saying right now? Everything that he says contradicts another thing that he says, and it's hard to watch. Like, people that do not think before they speak, and you could see that he keeps reverting to I feel, because this is all just emotion. It's all just delusional emotion. We all know emotions can lead you astray. Emotions can lead you in the wrong situation. A man that is not stoic when it comes to his emotions is a very dangerous person. And this is one of the outcomes that you will get from that. Someone that's not based in reality, someone that believes absolutely whatever they want to believe, regardless of whether it's backed by fact or not. It's just hard to watch, man. It's really hard to watch.
Women do. The terminology has been around for so long. Cis is a prefix. Cis means same. Instead of getting mad at trans and non-binary people for using updated terminology, get mad at Webster. You're not going along with the times and being educated on the different pronouns and the different
deflecting. This brother did not answer or rebuttal a single thing that she said. He did not directly attack or target a single thing that she said. Why? Because she's speaking based off of fact. And then he just changes the conversation about terminology and diction. This is not what the conversation was about. That was a component, yes, but that was not the overall point that she was trying to persuade to you. Are you going to listen or are you just here to talk? Please.
identities.
You have to admit, some of the pronouns are kind of ridiculous. I mean, to be, with all due respect, I mean, you I'm sure you have to agree some of the pronouns
I don't
people
think
use.
they're ridiculous. I think they're very expansive. Trans and non-binary people just want you to respect their chosen pronoun. We are not trying to force pronouns on you. Just understand that the terminology is going to continue to grow. If you're willing to educate yourself and understand, then you've got it.
The ability to give birth is a woman's greatest strength.
Now, we can probably all agree. Is my camera froze? My camera froze. What's going on here, man? My camera froze. My camera froze. All right, hold on, y'all. Hold on, y'all. Hold on, y'all. What is going on? What is going on, man? Give me 1 second, y'all. Let me get this camera up and running. All right, my camera obviously died. So let's add this. I don't know why I'm having an echo. Can you hear me? Echo, echo. Very bad echo. So let's do this. Oh wait, can y'all hear me still? I can still hear me from this mic. Okay. All right, seems fire. All right. Camera died, y'all. So we'll have to finish the stream. I guess we'll have to finish the stream from this perspective. And let me go ahead and flip my camera. I think y'all can still hear me. Yep. Let me go ahead and flip my camera. Boom. Ow. Ow. Don't judge my room, y'all. Don't judge this camera either. It's a little but we'll get through the night. We'll get through the night. Let's carry on.
Can the disagreeer step forward?
I'm not able to have children. So I'm still strong. I'm funny. I'm physically strong. I'm smart and I have a lot of strength. I don't believe that having a baby is the greatest strength because not all of us can. I cannot have kids
That was interesting.
due to medical issues from a medical procedure that I had when I was younger. And it's a hard subject to talk about. It's doesn't mean I'm any less of a woman, but can we get another question? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
One of the things that I regret was the fact that I would never be able to do that. But I was honored in the ability to participate it from the other side. Women are amazing. They don't just deal with that. So
How can you regret something that was never something that was like a choice for you to even have? I don't know. And the other lady, she's obviously hurt. She's obviously very hurt about the fact that she cannot copulate with the opposite gender. She thought she was biological. I'm pretty sure she is. So obviously there are other reasons, but she's obviously very upset about that, which shows the importance that biological children, the importance that role plays in a woman's life. She couldn't even continue to speak on the topic at hand without, getting emotional, feeling the type of way about it for obvious reasons. I mean, women revolve around people, men revolve around things. This isn't nuance.
While giving birth is not a woman's greatest strength, I do think that only biological women are capable of going through that process and bringing life into the world.
I need to push back on that because we're also forgetting that trans men.
Only biological women are capable. Ooh, let me see if my. Oh, there's an echo. Damn, there's an echo. All right, let me fix that first. Or should I just do a part two? Hey, can somebody in the chat let me know? Matter of fact, let me see. Let me pull this up on my phone. See if the echo is terrible. Cause if that's the case, nah, echo's not terrible. That's the case. All right, let me also go ahead and. Damn, this camera's actually pretty crispy. Actually, pretty crispy.
And transmasculine people can also give birth as well. And I don't think it's fair to just set it on one group that says that just biological women have that power to just give birth. And we have to be very clear when we look at the nuances of birth.
I recognize that there are people.
This is another thing that doesn't make sense because are trans men not just literally biological women? So does her statement not stand? Just carry on.
Who have different identities. There are biological women who identify as men and then go on to give birth. I would argue, however, that those people are still biological women. And I know that is something that can offend many, but that stands as my belief.
So the correct term is actually cisgendered woman. Cis means same. It means that you identify with the birth that you were assigned. And so, you know, I just really, really wish that we would kind of be a little bit more mutable to the terminology, because I think that's what really is going to open up that dialogue and that discussion.
If I may, I think the crux of the conversation kind of comes back to, are trans women women? And I think if we don't agree there, it's going to be very difficult to kind of keep the conversation going or even agree on the points that you guys are talking about, because if we don't believe that trans women are women, then the conversation kind of ends there in terms of whether they're like men can give birth or not, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure that's the case. I feel like the ability to give birth is not like the end all be all of a woman's like meaning and life and herself and her personality. And I think that if you can acknowledge that, I would also then maybe challenge the idea that womanhood, as opposed to like a female sex, like womanhood is a consistent thing that has always been one way.
So how would you define womanhood?
You sound like Matt Walsh.
It's a good question.
Womanhood, to me, is about standing in integrity. It is about being confident in who you are. And me as a Black trans woman should not be a threat to you. And what I see from a lot of cisgender women is they're trying to deem what womanhood is supposed to look like. I have my own perspective of womanhood. We can coexist in the same world, but the reality is we
All right, can y'all hear me? All right, can y'all hear me? Why is echoing? So hell no. My bad, y'all. Technical difficulties. You can hear me, huh? No, y'all can hear me now. Echoing? Any echoing? Nope. All right, let us carry on. All right. Forgot I changed my mouse. I don't even remember what I was saying. Let us carry on with the video.
We get so stuck on parts. Having a vagina is not the only thing that makes you a woman. I'm sorry. It takes integrity. It takes.
I mean, it's one of the main things that one of the main things. All right, I do have an echo. Maybe it's my headphones. One of the main things that my bad, y'all. Technical difficulties. Hello. Yo, yo, yo. That's weird. All right, let us continue. Neem Soha. If you're watching this on the replay, go ahead and skip through. All right, we good. Yeah, we good. We good. Oh yeah, we good. I'm tripping. All right. Let me see what I was even talking about.
Courage, it takes lifting other women up. It takes those things to begin to defy womanhood. And there's so many other different
Lifting other
things.
people
Can
up.
I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so if I were a white person and I said blackness is about integrity and courage and kind of the same thing that you used to
Okay.
define womanhood, and then I said I want to transition into a black person and I'm white.
Mhm.
And I'm redefining what blackness is to fit what
Yeah.
I view it as, right? There's no objective reality of what blackness is. Would you consider that appropriation, or do you think that's something
If you still based in reality and giving perfect analogies to populate the situation, watch how he completely gives a word salad to avoid anything that she said. Any points that she made, he's gonna give a complete word salad. Watch.
I should be allowed to do?
I consider that dodging, and I consider that comparing apples to oranges because race and gender identity are two separate different things.
They're all based in reality. The analogy was basically saying, what if I did something that's based in biology and reality and try to change the meaning of it based on how I feel internally. When it comes to race, black guy doesn't want to give that to white people. When it comes to gender, the man can't give that to the women. Like, come on.
Things. Because when we look at race, we have to look at many, many different structures of what whiteness and white supremacy looks like and how white supremacy can be manipulated into other things. And what happens is the closer you are in proximity to whiteness, you're able to weaponize it against other people. It reminds me a lot of Rachel Dolezal, who, masqueraded as a black woman. It really did open up many more doors of conversations around it, but it's still wrong. It's still not fair because she would still ultimately have a privilege that I, as a black trans woman, would not begin to have.
What's interesting is that we're talking about race and gender, or as we probably like to call it on our side, sex. Race actually has a more understandable structure for people being transracial. Race does actually exist on a spectrum. I'm biracial. Many perceive me to be black, even though I am also half white and half black. We label people like President Obama as a black president, even though he is as well. Race has never had binary markers. It does exist on the spectrum. Gender, however, does have binary markers. As much as we try, as much as we change the way that we self-present, chromosomes are not going to change.
Okay.
And that's just a reality.
All right, I'm going to bring up a little point here because you talked about the binary side of gender. Well, I was born a little of both. I believe I've never had my chromosomes checked, but since I fathered 2 children, I'm assuming I have the correct male chromosomes. So I was intersexed, and there's a lot of reasons that happens, none of which are well studied or understood. But a friend of mine in the pediatric trauma world says about 1 in 150 kids come out with some degree of ambiguity in their gender. For me, that appeared as always feeling out of place. And for the first week of my life, I was in the surgical wards at Naval Hospital in San Diego, getting pieces of me cut off. So, and then they gave me testosterone for the first 11 years of my life. I wish the world were truly sexually binary. It would make it so much easier. But there is a little bit of a smear. And, as a trans person, I'm a very conservative trans person. I don't see the huge gender spectrum that a lot of people in the
There's no
trans
such thing as a conservative trans person. Being trans is obviously quite the complete opposite of conservative. A conservative woman are the women that are sitting in the hospital. So I don't know what he means by that. But let's carry on.
Community do. Do I feel better having transitioned? Yes, absolutely. I used to live in a little shell, very large shell, but now I'm, much more open about who I am. Is that the only thing that generally defines a woman? No, I don't think that is the only thing that generally defines a woman.
Right. I think there are a lot of women who may be on our side of the argument who will try to maybe invalidate your experiences by saying you can't give birth or you can't have a period. And while those things may be true, I'm sure there's a lot of other different struggles that you all are going through. And
what I will go ahead and say is, it's not the only thing that defines a woman, but without that, you also can woman. Surgically afloat. Once again, that is not the only thing that defines a woman, but without it, you can also not be identified as a woman unless you're surgically afloat. So yes, but no. What do y'all think, man?
And I would truly believe that you probably are highly discriminated against in our society, and it is hard to be you. It is hard to go through the things that you go through and have to deal with some of the responses that you get from people. And it's not a struggle that I would wish on myself at all.
It's not a struggle I wish on my worst enemy.
Trans women
It's a struggle you brought upon yourself.
compete in women's sports.
What was the question?
In women's sports.
I do think that trans women have every right to compete in women's sports. When trans women are on hormones, the hormones break their body down. Having gender affirming surgery breaks down the body. And so I think we really need to be educated before we jump to a conclusion that trans women are stronger than cis women in sports. Hi, everybody.
I find it interesting.
You had the biological bone density, the bones, the muscle mass, and the strength of a man for 35 years. Okay, this is school sport. So let me say 16, 17 years. Or even college, that counts. So 18 years at least. No level of castration of hormone therapy can break you down to the equivalent of a female. There's no, even females within themselves are equivalent when it comes to these type of things. They just range in an equivalent. They just range close to each other. So to actually believe that you can go from a male and break yourself down to a female's biology, to a female's strength, to a female's speed, to there's so many components that play a role into this that hormone therapy isn't enough to make you equivalent to a female. It's just, especially when it comes to physical attributes.
Interesting that you assume the people who disagree with you are uneducated. And I will speak out against that. I think the research shows that trans women do happen to have a biological advantage against biological women. Even though you are taking hormones and that does start to change your body and level things out, we're talking about primarily people who have transitioned post-puberty, which means they do have male bone density, male wingspan, male hand size, feet size, lung capacity. All of these things are going against women, biological women, when trans women start to enter their spaces, their sports, and compete against them. And this is really concerning for me.
I think for me, it's not a question of whether or not trans women can compete in sports. It's a question of how can we change the institution of sports in this country to make it equitable and to create more opportunity for cis women, for trans.
This is where I have a problem with that. Now we want to change the whole institution of sports and competitiveness to what? Accommodate to a very small minority of society. Trans people aren't a majority or anything. We don't, I could have sworn we did things to accommodate the majority. That's what the democracy is, right? Trans people are a very small minority. Why would we change the whole plane of physical fitness and sports to accommodate a very small amount of people? What sense does that make? These people don't want equality. They want privilege. And it's just like, come on, man. Come on.
As women. And like, that's kind of like why I wanted to actually ask you all, like, what is your relationship to sports been?
I don't think you have to have a direct relationship to sports to realize that women are being affected by this issue. And I do reject the idea of equity. There is no way to come about an equality of outcome, which is what equity is saying. There's a reason that women's sports.
And I don't say this out of like hate or anything. I say this out of fairness because one day I'm gonna have a daughter. I don't want guys like me coming into the league taking away track trophies and basketball scholarships and other things that were created for women from women. I played college ball. I didn't go to the league or anything like that. But I guarantee you put me in the women's basketball association, I will be the greatest WNBA player in history in 1 year. I don't say that to sound crazy. I don't say that to brag or boast. I'm just saying that to emphasize the dramatic difference in male and female physicality when it comes to sports. I didn't even make it to the NBA, but you put me in the WNBA, I will easily become the greatest player that's ever touched that court. Easily. Easily. Like a month of training, not even, to be honest, right now, flat out. That emphasizes the differences that there are between us. I'm not even NBA ready. But you put me on the WNBA tomorrow, I'm giving them 50, 10, and 11. I might get 80, 20, and 40. I don't know. I might just get whatever I feel like. I don't know. I might just come out there, flash a three, maybe get me a dunk, be the first to dunk in like 10 years. I don't know. I'm only 5'10". I'm still out here. Hey, come on, like it wouldn't make sense. I wouldn't even feel right or fair playing against such different competition to where I'm elevated to such a level that there is no competition based off of my biology alone. I don't want to go against any females in the track meet. I'm gonna win every time. I was a city champ. Imagine if I was a city champ against men. Imagine if I was running against women. What?
Are less funded and less watched than men's sports. It's because men seem to excel athletically and they seem to press the bounds of athleticism way farther than women do. We now exist on a slippery slope. If it's female sports, is it then female locker rooms? Is it then female prisons, which we're now seeing becoming an issue here in California, where biological male inmates are being put in female facilities because they identify as women? We have to discuss as a society how much we give into the feelings of wanting everybody to be accepted and how much we are willing to do that at the expense of biological women.
I use myself as an example. This is about how big I was in junior high school and early high school. I used to be able to walk up to a V8 engine block, pick it up off the floor and set it on a table. And if I was in powerlifting or weightlifting, that amount of, that advantage was just unbelievable. I've been on hormones for 15 years. Did it weaken me? Absolutely. Did my bone density really hasn't changed? My muscular hasn't changed. And this is not a binary question. There's a lot of nuances involved.
I just want to ask a question.
See, I like how, well, I don't understand why he didn't double his response, obviously, because he just debunked everything that he just said, right? He goes ahead and says that bone density and muscle mass did not change, and he obviously has a clear advantage from being a biological male. The other biological male on further to the left was just preaching about how the hormones and the blockers do all this, that, and the third to make you a female and strength and physical attributes, which is not correct. And the other male just obviously corrected him on that. He seems to have no rebuttal. Interesting.
For what you were saying, can you throw out some statistics?
I don't think you need to have
Like I
there.
said,
So there's
here we go again. The one motherfucker on the show that's been talking about nothing but their feelings is asking for statistics. This is the world we live in today. This is just absolutely blasphemous. Where are your statistics? You haven't quoted anybody, any research, any author, any institution, any psychologist, any doctor, not once this whole 26 minutes in. But now you're asking for other people's statistics, even though the things that they're saying are universally known by, I don't know, all of society since the beginning of time. Where are your statistics? I think we'd like to see those more, because you're the one giving these nuanced ideas that have not been supported by literally anything, and even being debunked by other trans male counterparts on the same exact debate. But let us carry on.
there's an abundance of research. There's even trans activists who agree with exactly what I'm saying. And your hormones can change, right?
One thing right
And
next to you.
even she just spoke to the fact that her bone density did not change in going on hormones and changing these things.
Yeah.
And we can see it in sports as we're watching them. Leah Thomas is a great example.
So if you can't throw out the statistics, we're not doing enough of the work. And let's
I
also be
disagree.
clear. Let's also
The ability to just ignore everything that she just said. And go ahead and continue her own rhetoric, his own rhetoric. It's just absolutely insane to me. Are you hearing her? Are you understanding her? Are you listening at all? Are you trying to comprehend the things that she's saying? Or do you already have your or do you already have your mindset set? Are you here just to talk and not to listen? Are you here not to listen at all? Is there no change in your mind? Why are you here? This is a debate. This isn't your feelings. Facts don't care about your feelings. She hasn't directly responded to anything that she says. This is a whole bunch of word salad. Gymnastics, avoiding any type of contradiction at the cost of truth, at the cost of reality, at the cost of science, at the cost of fact.
also be clear, there are some cisgender women who produce high levels of testosterone as well. And so we really have to unpack it from all different sides here.
Can you produce statistics about the bone density of biological men and how it changes upon being on hormones and whether or not it levels out to biological women?
I actually cannot, because when I would think of those statistics, I would think it was BS, to be quite honest with you, because the reality of it is we could talk about statistics and the research all day.
Hold on. So the motherfucker that just asked for statistics, ruled statistics as BS. You see how she's just literally contradicting herself at any cost, just not agreeing with the biological. What means not the biological shit? The real women. That's blasphemous. How could you? What? Like, did she just Did nobody see this? Am I tripping? Am I tripping, y'all? Y'all let me know.
Long, but it's about experience. We're going to be looking more at the experience, because again, when we look at cisgender women who produce high
personal experiences and personal feelings, do not often reflect reality. So why are we talking about personal experience instead of the consensus? What? Just come on, man. This is so hard to do.
levels of testosterone and who have been kicked out of sports and been disqualified from teams based on something that they biologically cannot control, then what are we really talking about here?
Well, we're talking about, I mean, data and that is overwhelming. And we're talking about what is also we're capable of seeing with our human eyes. I think it's very clear that if you compare maybe you to the rest of us, there is going to be a strength difference. There's going to be a bone density difference.
But you're just saying that you don't know until we physically do something, and just perceiving and assuming just because I look a certain way, that's not fair. Me and her we could look completely different or whatever, but she may be stronger than me.
I agree, but
she have much more agility and vitality than I do.
That knowing that he's probably the strongest person on the show. Like, he's obviously the most muscular built on the show, so you'd assume that come with the most strength. He's probably the youngest male, maybe including the one in the middle, because honestly, he's the strongest male and the strongest person sitting here down at these on these chairs, and that's probably non-negotiable, non-debatable. But he has to go ahead and make an example out of absolutely nothing. We know these women are stronger than you. Like, this is where
we don't know that until you actually do it.
I'm saying it has been studied, it's been done.
And it's been done, we've seen it
but it's an assumption,
time again.
But we're only going on assumption at this point. Because again,
it's not assumption when we see it. Maybe it's the news cycle that I watch, but I see it a lot. I see it quite often where they're showing trans women beating. I mean, I'm by far.
And you don't see women dominate in the men's sports, right? You don't see trans men going into men's sport and just completely dominating and wiping the field with them. This is what happens when you, in my opinion, twist God's design. And when you go against God's design, create these problems that you wouldn't have if you weren't going against what God intended.
I'm going to take her side.
People that are based in reality are also based in religion. It's interesting. I point that out. People that aren't based in reality seem to speak of their own delusions, but I don't know. They seem to not believe in religion and speak on their own delusion. I'm not here to say any one religion is the true religion. I'm just pointing out what's obvious.
A little bit on that. And let me say one more thing, and I'm supporting you on this one. There's a great deal of women that, and actually there was a lady in the last Olympics that they actually disqualified until she went on androgen blockers to knock her testosterone down to a female level. Like I said, this is not a binary yes or no question. And the whole idea of messing with what, God puts up.
Doing this like that still doesn't come through. It's not just testosterone that determines your overall ability, of overall physical performance. It's not just testosterone. There are, once again, 2,463, I believe, 64 different biological differences between the male and the female. It's not just testosterone. That's one neurotransmitter. It's not just this. So to act like that is the biggest difference in the world, obviously it does, but it's not everything.
God put me up, okay, if you want to take that. And I had this conversation with a very religious man in San Diego, and he was like, oh, I don't quite know how to deal with that.
And God made you that way, but he didn't make a lot of the people transitioning.
I understand.
No, but God also
understands
my transition. God, first of all, knew what I was going to be in my life. God already knew I was going to be trans when God put me here. So I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair when people dip and dab. Your relationship with God is personal.
Yes.
It's sacred.
Let's
and I don't
there.
think it's fair when other people dib and dab in other people's relationship with God when they don't understand what they go through. God still blesses me as a trans woman. God blesses you as a cisgender woman. God is embodied in me as a trans person. I don't think it's fair.
These people want so much. Let me change my screen. These people preach so much on being accommodated, but cannot accommodate others. She obviously says she did not want to be called a cis woman, that she is just a woman. But he continues to call her that to make himself seem less different. She's just a woman. She says she wants to be called a woman, so call her that. These people want to complain about pronouns and this, that, and the third, but can't even respect biological real women when they're speaking to them. Come on, like let's not do that.
Again, when we judge people's personal relationship with God, gender identity, sexual orientation, none of that matters to a God that loves all.
Gender dysphoria is real.
I think
Like, if he's speaking in like biblical terms, there's a whole book in the Bible that speaks against homosexuality. God literally burned down a whole town and froze a woman to stone just for looking back at that town as she was saved from it because of homosexuality. Don't like these people don't read the Bible, but I don't know. Maybe we're not talking about the same God though. Let me carry on.
it is obviously real because many people experience it, but like any kind of dysphoria, whether it's someone who thinks they're overweight or anything, I think it should be treated as not reality. Like if I thought I was obese,
See,
I
now
wouldn't
watch.
want to go to
Let's all keep in mind that the dark skinned brother admitted to having a mental gender dysphoria earlier on in this video. So let's see how he responds to her here.
a affirming therapist to tell me, yes, you are obese and you should, get skinnier.
Well, I had the opportunity of working on the DSM-4, I think it was, when we actually declassified transgender dysphoria from a mental illness to a condition. I had been, at that point in time, I'd been cross-dressing for 50 years. And, because that dysphoria was there and every single thing I did to try to drive it away didn't work. I spent millions of dollars trying to be the coolest dude in the world. I bought airplanes, I bought everything that I could to just show the world how masculine I was. It didn't work. It didn't go away. And I did therapy. I purposely went to a therapist that was anti-gender affirming. And literally he said, you need to do this, and because it was so deep seated. Spent 6 weeks as Gina with my son. And at the end of that period of time, he asked two very fundamental questions. The most important one was, it's got to be truly exhausting for you to lead two lives. And I was kind of like, that kind of shook me to the core that my 22-year-old son saw that better than I did. So shortly thereafter, I announced to my family that I was going to transition.
It's got to be extremely hard looking at your father in a certain light your whole life, and then one day he just decides to pull a Kylie Jenner or whatever that Kardashian dad guy's name is, Bruce Jenner. Like, how is that supposed to affect a child's psyche? Like, when your child can... Let me stop. Let's carry on.
And I separated because of it. The kids were not necessarily shocked, but understood and have supported me quite well. And my wife has actually become a very good, very warm, supporting person for me.
Gender dysphoria almost made me kill myself. And coming from Mississippi, at the time, there wasn't a lot of access to gender affirming resources like hormones, if I wanted surgery, whatever the case may be. And a lot of us trans folks who don't have access like that, a lot of us have to do sex work to be able to afford some of these things as well. Me coming up at the age of 20, and I knew I had a serious gender dysphoria, I did things to my body.
I don't understand. See, when it comes to... Is there an echo? You gotta let me know in the comments. But when it comes to gender dysphoria, this is obviously something that is a result of not accepting who you are and who you were put on this earth as. And he is sitting here admitting that he didn't accept that he was a man. Essentially, this is where this is a result of resentment. He resented himself or maybe his parents or whoever convinced him that he's not a man. He began to resent himself, and this is where all these self-deletion thoughts came from, because when you can't accept yourself for who you are, you don't want to be you. This is why parents need to accommodate their children and help them understand that they are them, that there's no such thing as an accident. That if they were born a male, that they are a male. If they were born a female, that they are a female. I don't know why this is so hard to. I feel like he even understands the mental stigma, the mental this deassociation that he has within himself and his uh, ideologies and his gender, between his mental and the physical. He understands it, but this is just an easier way for him to cope. I feel like, I'm not saying I know the guy or understand, but I just feel like this is an easier way for him to cope by just going ahead and saying, all right, this is what I am, and da 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 da, instead of just accepting himself for who he is, because he's already been breeded to hate himself at such an early age, which is gender affirming, which is just essentially teaching someone to hate themselves for who they biologically are and wish that they were biologically somebody else.
That I should have went to a hospital to do. That is something that's very, very hard for people to understand. A lot of us commit suicide because of gender dysphoria. And so it hits our community a lot harder.
I do think gender
Yeah,
dysphoria
I
is
also
very
do
much
not-
real. I think the issue
I
that's
also do not think he understands completely what gender dysphoria is, which is why he will admit to having that, but also adamantly preach that he's by a woman, because those two things contradict each other. Obviously, if you have a gender dysphoria, you don't accept yourself for who you actually are. So you're basically admitting that you're not a woman. But I don't know. Let us carry on.
happened, especially in the space of science and research, is that we've looked at gender dysphoria and said the only source of care that we can go through is blind gender affirmation care. And a lot of the research shows that this is not the route to go into. And other countries that have decided to do nonpartisan research, Sweden, Finland, have decided that yes, gender affirmation care should be an option, but it really should be the last resort when it comes to treating people who appear at clinics with gender dysphoria. You know, a lot of conservatives will deny and say, well, gender affirmation care does not make them happier. And in many cases, that is true. But there are the cases like yourselves where the gender affirmation care does make them happier.
You know, I know a lot of people that have transitioned, have untransitioned. I've talked with a gentleman at a religious right convention one day, and he was sitting there screaming how Jesus got him out of his gender transition. And honestly, that was the saddest man I've ever talked to in my life. When I looked at him straight in the eyes and I said, you know, here, I don't agree with what you say, but I 100% support your right to say that. And he just literally broke down crying on the steps of the Supreme Court.
If I could interject really quickly, I do.
No, absolutely not.
I feel as though the medical profession is actually inching towards a space that is going to become unsafe for people who try to express their gender dysphoria, because now we have young children coming into clinics expressing this, who by and large, statistically, about 60 to 70% grow out of that dysphoria. But because it's become a political issue where many activists have come in and say, no, you blindly affirm, you affirm to the furthest extent that you can, rather than going through a more comprehensive process with these children. We have a what I think is a medical tragedy happening against young people in this country.
I have been sexually
In
harassed.
fact, not to that, but
Yeah, I think in our society, it's so sexualized, everyone and every.
yeah, I was gonna say honestly, um, it's not hard to believe. I feel like everybody in their entire lifetime has been sexually harassed, even men. Like, it's just, even though men won't look at it as sexual harassment because men are more sexual people, so they're more likely to, I don't want to say enjoy, but let certain things slide that women wouldn't let slide. But women are obviously more subject to harassment just because they're the weaker sex, and there's a level of aggression and craziness that niggas uphold within their heads that is unexplainable by man. You hear me? And I'm not saying it's okay, because it's not. So I think anybody would have stepped forward on this, or would have an argument to step forward on this. I don't think that was very prevalent question, but let's carry on.
everything. And I think we owe a lot of that to pornography and just media.
Facts.
And I think the kind of acceptance that I do see more so in the LGBT community of, like, you know, sex is great and let like everyone talk about it and there's no shame and everyone's just blurting out, you know, the fact that we're perpetuating a culture that's frankly, in my opinion, disgusting.
So are you talking specifically about LGBT people?
I'm talking more so just about this sexual revolution, that the more sexual you are, the more partners you have, the more open you are about your sex life and everything, the more like liberated you are. What is consent? Like people are coming out of the woodwork saying, you know, I was violated, this happened to me. But they like drove home with that person. And I'm not blaming them, but I am saying those lines are being blurred because of our just flagrant disregard for any kind of like actual relationship prior to the sexual encounter. And I think a lot of people are being exploited left and right.
True sex positivity has been powerful. It has helped us to grow and learn about our bodies in so many ways and learn safe sex practices in so many ways. What I would blame for rape culture or for a lack of good boundaries or that kind of thing is we live in a capitalist system that has taken things like sex positivity and mangled it and repackaged it and made it a whole other thing than what it actually is.
I was sexually harassed for 5 years by a woman. It does happen because I'm pretty sure it's going to be when there's been that. It's hard coming from a man, but to me it was harder coming from a woman because it wasn't expected. Like I understand you're going to probably touch on that about how men are more on the predatory side or the more harassing side sometimes. But I just want to let you know that it does happen with women as well.
All through my life, you know, world's big.
I don't want to go ahead and say men are more on the predatory side. I don't know. If someone made an argument for it, I wouldn't disagree necessarily because men are the more dominant sex, and with dominance comes, you know, power thrill, power lust. You know how too much power for the wrong person is a very terrible thing. But I will go ahead and say that, like, in often situations where a female would speak on harassment, not obviously not the dramatic situations where it's obvious that a guy is doing too much, but let's just say like in a work situation where a guy's flirting or this, that, and the third. I feel like when females do that, guys don't necessarily perceive that as harassment. Probably because of the physical ability to protect themselves more. But oftentimes in the same situation, a female is going to feel more like she's being harassed than a male would. So I don't know. I actually don't know which side is more prevalent on. But yeah.
Biggest kid in junior high school, I basically was harassed continuously for being gender nonconforming. Back then, you know, everybody in junior high school took showers together. I basically had a permanent welt on my bottom from people snapping towels at me because, you know, I wasn't as well endowed as I probably should be. I had, you know, pretty good sized boy boobs and basically was just unhappy being in sports. But, you know, it happens everywhere. I have been sexually assaulted. It didn't work out well for any of them. It's real. Let me just put it that way. It's absolutely real.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to find a person who hasn't been sexually harassed in some way, shape, or form, whether you are male or female. I think it's an experience that we all share because we are in somewhat of a hyper-sexualized society, and people love to make those comments public. I am a podcaster and I do social media for a living, so as you can imagine, the onslaught of sexual harassment is quite vast.
From a very young age, I've had this recurring nightmare of something happening to me, trying to warn people, and no one believes me. When you're not believed that you're a desirable person, and I really don't think rape has anything to do with desire.
Did he just say he was trying to warn people about a dream he's having? Let me let them finish before I say anything.
But when you're not believed in that way, when trans women are experiencing trans misogyny, we're the ones who are least believed when we are sexually assaulted.
Whoa, see, these people make up words. What the hell is trans misogyny? The definition of the word misogyny is the hatred or contempt for women. So what would trans misogyny be? That's not a term. That's not a term. He just made that up on spot. I've never heard that said before. What is trans misogyny? What?
And it just feels so disempowering and so terrifying when you know that you are someone who is seen as hypersexual, as inherently sexual, as inherently predatory, and yet at the same time you're seen as someone who can be isolated and sexually assaulted and not believed.
I don't think there's anything inherently predatory about trans people. And I think oftentimes when we're talking from a conservative perspective, it gets misconstrued as viewing you as a threat. And I hope that that never comes off. And I think that allegations of sexual assault, regardless of who they're coming from, should be taken seriously.
We found common
I
ground.
think we agreed on something.
We found common ground.
Well, long story short, shout out to Jubilee for having these conversations. A lot of people aren't willing to have these conversations. So shout out to them for letting these conversations be held and in a time and era when nobody else will. But I will go ahead and say that there was not necessarily any common ground met except on that last question, that the dark-skinned brothers seem to disagree with absolutely everything that was said by the women. The brother with glasses that was kind of older, he kind of seemed to understand when it came to children, that children are just off limits. So shout out to him for having that type of mindset, even though he's going through whatever dysphoria is or whatever he's going through, whatever gender ideology he's struggling with. And the one in the middle seemed troubled. I don't know in what way. He didn't speak much, but he seemed troubled, like he's been through a lot of trauma, which may be an outcome of this. But who am I to say so? It might just be a mental illness, or like they were saying, dysphoria that he's been battling for who Lord knows how long, that he doesn't even understand. So who knows? But shout out to everybody that came together for this interview. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to Jubilee for having this conversation. Long story short, you are what you are. I'd say if you're a parent, encourage your children to love who they are, because telling them that they are in the wrong body, that they are the wrong gender, is encouraging them to hate themselves. It's creating resentment in the future. Why do you think the self-deletion rates are so high? Because these people do not like who they are. Teach your children to love themselves. Allow them to understand that you love them regardless of what they have going on, and that they are who they are. Let's stay based in reality. You know what I'm saying? But shout out to y'all, man. I'm about to go live here again in 5 minutes. It's your boy King Katumwa. We out.